very, very sad, you know.
You're watching Al Jazeera. We break into programming to bring you some breaking news. We're hearing from American media who are now reporting that the U.S. has started retaliatory strikes for the deaths of 3 soldiers that took place in Jordan earlier this week, in fact, on Sunday. So what we know so far is that there are reports that the U.S. is bombing parts of eastern Syria. Let's bring in Zaina joining us from Lebanon in Beirut with more on this developing story. Zaina, what are you hearing about what's going on in eastern Syria, we understand?
Well, what you mentioned, the American media report that the retaliation, the U.S. retaliation for the killing of the soldiers has begun, but there's still no confirmation from the Pentagon. What we have been hearing from sources on the ground really are conflicting reports. Some mentioning airstrikes, a series of airstrikes. Now, Deir ez-Zor, it wouldn't be surprising because Deir ez-Zor, this is in the east of Syria, it borders Iraq. This province is considered to be a stronghold of groups that are backed by Iraq. In fact, they control the border crossing Syria and Iraq, a very strategic location. So if these areas go after these groups, then definitely Deir ez-Zor will be among the targets. So conflicting reports. Now, what we understand, this wouldn't be really the first time, if indeed this is the U.S. military carrying out these strikes, targeting this area. In fact, since the war on Gaza, since Iranian-backed groups started to target U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq, there have been, retaliatory strikes by the U.S. military in this area. But the biggest question right now is whether or not, indeed, if this is the U.S. military do the killing of the soldiers, will this be enough to deter these groups who have said that they will stop targeting American troops despite the imminent retaliation? For the time being, we are hearing reports of airstrikes in eastern Syria, an area where Iranian-backed groups, Iranian personnel as well, Iranian facilities, they're all based in this area, that strategic border region, but still no confirmation from the Pentagon.
Okay, Zaina, we'll let you go for now. We'll come back to you a little bit later. We do apologize for the connection, the audio issues we were having with Zaina, but we'll bring in Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bishara to weigh in on all of this. So Marwan, as Zaina was just saying, look, we still haven't had confirmation from the Pentagon that this indeed is the U.S., but this is what American media is reporting right now, that airstrikes have taken place in particular, for what we know so far, is in Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's expected.
Right.
Regardless of our attempts at scratching our heads the past half an hour, just trying to figure out who's responsible for the bombing, where the bombing are taking place, why certain American sources deny it and others confirm it, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the literature and the declarations, statements, and everything else been coming out the past 5 or 6 days, clearly the Biden administration had made this decision to retaliate to the attack on northern Jordan. And it clearly had a number of potential targets. The Republicans in Washington have encouraged the Biden administration to bomb Iran proper. Biden said that I don't want a war with Iran, and the administration was presumably looking for alternative options other than bombing Iran itself. So you can say that it had 4 options. Option number 1 is to bomb the Iranian military targets, conventional military targets, even nuclear installations, and so on and so forth. It discounted that. The other option was to bomb the Iranian Revolutionary Guard bases. Clearly, it discounted that option as well. There was a challenge that whether it will bomb those Iranian Republican Guards, and it will be faced with their defenses. And apparently they didn't really go for that option. And the third option was to bomb Kataib Hezbollah's or the Hezbollah brigades bases in Iraq. For the time being, we don't hear of reports of any bombings within Iraq. So in fact, if those reports are correct, Washington or the Biden administration has chosen the low-hanging target, the low-hanging fruit among all of that, and chose the target is in the failed state of Syria.
So what would be the aim of that then?
So according to reports that looked at what are the value for some of those targets, apparently Kataib Hezbollah in eastern Syria is quite concentrated in terms of its bases, and most important for the American forces is that that's where they fly out the drones. Let's remember that the attack at the American base in northern Jordan or in the Jordan-Syrian border was carried out by a drone. It was the first time that an American soldier died by bombing from the air in a number of decades. This is a whole new chapter for American strategy and for American defense system and so on and so forth. So the first target apparently was the one that was looked at during the week, where various evaluations from Washington were saying that the most important strategic target in terms of a retaliation to the attack in Jordan would be to attack the base from which those drones are flown, and that is in the eastern border in Syria.
Marwan, in the bigger picture and putting this into context, does this have the potential to escalate the situation and ignite the region? I mean, just a few days ago, the Secretary of Defense, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, he said that the U.S. will not tolerate attacks on American troops, but at the same time, he said this is a dangerous moment in the Middle East.
Exactly. I mean, when you listen to what they're saying in Washington, they're basically arguing that there's absolutely no way America, the world's superpower and the Middle East's greatest power, was not going to retaliate for the killing of 3 of its soldiers. And not just that this comes after reportedly something between 150 and 160 times where American forces in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and other places or targets have been attacked. So it was almost accepted as a fact that America was going to retaliate anyway. So within this condition that America was going to retaliate, America apparently chose the most de-escalatory escalation. Mm-hmm. So any number of those options I just underlined to you earlier about whether they will attack conventional forces in Iran, Iran Republican Guards, or Iranian-supported groups in Iraq, it actually chose not to attack any one of them for the time being. They chose, as I said, the low-hanging targets in Syria, a failed state basically, where America could function. It actually already has bases there, and it doesn't feel that it would upset or doesn't care if it upsets the regime as it would if it upset the presidency in Iraq or the regime in Iran. In Syria, it's a much easier target for the United States to do. Now, let's all remember that back in 2018, Trump or the Trump presidency also chose to bomb within Syria after the chemical attacks back then. So Syria is a much easier target for the United States than Iraq and Iran, and clearly they've chosen the place where reportedly that's where Kataib Hezbollah flew its drone that killed the American soldiers in northern Iraq. Now, we should remember and remind our viewers around the world is that the Americans have warned once and again the past few days that this is part of longer, sustained campaign, that this is not a one-off. In fact, their retaliation is going to be sustained and in a number of, because they claim that Kataib Hezbollah itself did not attack just once. It, in fact, attacked a number of times.
Marwan, stand by for just a second because we're going to bring in our correspondent, Roslyn Jordan, who's joining us from the U.S. Ros, what are you hearing on your end